Today's Sunday, September 17th, and at this very moment in time, the Bills are temporarily ahead in their game. This will change, I
Ooh,
predict.
ooh.
So at our last meeting on Monday, towards the end, we started to get into, and Ryan had some really awesome thoughts. We started to get into what we might want in terms of a feature set in if we could make say a next version of the 2068, like so the ZX Spectrum next equivalent of the 2068, only we don't have a Kickstarter, so we're not going to get molds made and custom keyboards likely. We don't have the critical mass that the Spectrum folks have. But I thought we would talk about that some more today. Just sort of spitball, come up with the most outrageous ideas, and then figure out. Maybe today we don't figure out what's reasonable, but eventually we do put together something. Because the reason I say this is because we got a lot of really smart folks still involved in our little scene here, and I think we have the wherewithal among ourselves to not only think of a really interesting potential machine, but to actually make that thing happen. Before we do that though, Joe, do you want to talk about this little 3D printed cartridge case that came out of Randy Kindig asked us, for their cartridge case for cartridges that the little cartridge boards that I sell, and Claudius sent us a
It's worth noting who Randy is, actually. Randy Kindig has the Floppy Days podcast.
yeah, thank you,
Yeah,
thank you,
and
because I
also,
assume that everybody knows everything.
yeah,
Right.
and also he's on the Antic podcast. He's a co-host of the Antic podcast.
Antic podcast, yeah,
Yeah,
he's really active.
yeah.
I
Dave,
sorry, go ahead.
I used, and I've got 4 of them done that way, the soft-sided cassette tape cases.
To make a little cartridge case.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Bend the pins out that held the tape from spooling,
Yeah.
and the cartridges fit right in there
Oh, I'll be darned. That's
without
crazy.
any slopping around.
Okay. Okay. Like a PCB, a printed circuit
Yeah.
board. Okay. Well, Claudius sent us a file for the Portuguese size cartridge case. And for those of you who don't know this whole little difference, after Timex in the American Timex decided that they were going to get out of the business, Timex in Portugal continued to make 2068s, and then they made some other variants. They made this little thing called a 2048, which was smaller. But from what I gather, they did not have access. Portugal did not have access to the same technology that was used to make the original cartridges for the American 2068, and that was what's called chip on board, where they just take the little computer chip and put it right on the circuit board, and just put this blob of black epoxy on top of it. They bond the chip to the board directly, instead of soldering a regular chip like the ones that are behind Paul onto a circuit board. And so the American cartridge case is lower profile than the Portuguese cartridge case. What they did in Portugal was they opened the slot up a little bit more. They raised the profile of the case, and so that you could fit a chip inside of that thing, like a little EEPROM chip. So Claudius sent us this 3D file, which is designed for the Portuguese one, and Joe, you have been reworking it to make it fit the American one.
Right. So basically, I just got the idea that there was some chatter about it in the forum about how I think it was Zebra Systems were buying the Portuguese cartridges and sanding them down.
Yeah, they would cut the top off.
The top was very thin or whatever, or non-existent, and then you could slide it in there. So I thought, well, that would be easy enough just to modify the STL files and make it thinner. So I tried that, and the top was too thin to be of any support. But then Dave and I got in a discussion about how we could replace the chip with surface mount, which of course wasn't available back then, at least not like we have today. And so that gave me extra headroom, so I could lower the lid, and I lowered it quite a bit. I think I need to knock it down another. What'd you say, about another half to 1 millimeter?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. If it fits, but if it's snug, so
yeah,
we'll do that, and then Dave's gonna send me a copy of the board or a file that gives us dimensions, and we should be able to drill a little hole in the top, and that'll allow us to put a selector switch so we can load multiple cartridges on one, or multiple ROM images on one cartridge.
Yeah.
And should be able to program them actually from the 2068 port, which sounds kind of interesting, kind of fun.
Did you ever think about potting compound? Conformal coat potting compound? To seal it on the bottom side.
On the bottom side? Well, here, let me show you. So this is a 3D print of the design that Claudia sent me, and it's kind of hard to tell, but there's a little bump up here.
I see that.
Okay, and then this is a 3D print that that Joe sent, and the bump up's not quite as tall, and it just separates into 2 pieces, and there's enough room inside for the circuit board. And then you just snap the 2 pieces together, and I guess glue them or screw them. What do you think, Joe?
I thought it would probably be easier just to glue them together.
Okay. Yeah.
But it could be a completely, open source project that anybody could order their own boards and do their own soldering and make it. So.
Yeah. And to your point, Joe, I need to run the right enable line to the right line on the cartridge.
And we could even, I was thinking that you could almost put a micro switch in there of some kind, the little surface mount, not push button, but the flip flop.
Yeah.
Right? So that you could turn that off with a, I don't know, toothpick or whatever, a little pen tip, right? And then it's almost like a surface mount single dip switch is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So, but you can flip it off. That way you could write to it, flip that off, and then it can't be written to again by accident in case your machine crashes, which I have done before in the past.
Adam, you were going to say something?
This is
yeah. Go ahead.
Hi. No, another option is if you can put a chamfer pin in the in the back or in any location, you can put a small chamfer to enable the writing.
The writing, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
You put in 90-degree with the small. If you don't have space, but depending on the space, you have to mount a switch or whatever. 2 pins is easy.
Yeah.
What about dip switches?
I think that's what Joe's talking about, but super low profile surface mount.
Low profile surface mount, single switch. It looks kind of like a miniature dip switch.
Yeah, I've seen those things. Yeah. Okay. Good call. I'll stick that in the
or you could even wire up the rotary switch to one position where you could, well, no, because you still have to select which ROM you're going to write to. So you need both. Yeah. Okay. So it's going to have to be a separate switch.
Which space?
But another option is if you have space on the cartridge board, you can set the latch, and also you send a command to start select the page or whatever. You put a
Well,
or 6-bit latch.
Right, but I was worried if it was done in software, there's always the possibility of corrupting you. Of course, you could just reflash it, but you can corrupt your image that way.
right, right. And
All it takes is some poorly written code, and I'm really good at writing code stuff.
I don't think you're alone in that.
Yeah, hold my beer.
Yeah, actually, you know what? I'm going to share my screen and show y'all. Share my screen. Here we go. So here's the physically reduced circuit board that should fit within the cartridge that that Joe has been editing. This U3 is a flash chip, and it is what's the part number on this? I forgot. I think it's an it's an 010. So it's 128K of flash. So 8 16K images. And then over here, this little spot is a it's a really nifty little rotary switch. I wonder if I have the, there it is. Cool. It looks like this little surface mount device, and it's got a little knob on it, and you know, you can see that it's got 0 through well, you can't, oh yeah, 0 through 7, right? And so the thought behind this is that, you know, you can turn your 2068 off, change the pointer to one of these, you know, things, and turn it back on, and that selects that specific that specific image. And Joe, that switch could live down here on the right hand corner. And I put the rotary switch, you know, thinking about what it's going to be like when it's stuck in the cartridge slot, right? So you're going to lift up that cartridge, the door, okay, and that's on the right hand side of the computer, and most people are right-handed, so I put it on the left to make it easy for a person to go, and a right-handed person to go and turn that. Sacrificing my own left-handedness for y'all.
Thank you, David.
You're the only one in your right mind, except for me.
That's right.
So I have my question that I wanted to ask earlier. Why do you want to create a cartridge that you can burn from the 2068, basically?
Well, you can, and now that Paul has found some documentation for, oh, where did I put that thing? Here we go. I have this little cartridge here that has 2 RAM chips in it and a battery.
Non-volatile RAM.
Yeah. So these are static RAM, and the battery will back it up. And this was designed by a guy named Tom Bent, and Tom Woods marketed this thing. And Tom Woods, I think, wrote the software and the manual for taking up, you know, taking whatever kind of program you have and moving it into, you know, into that cartridge. And so, for instance, Ryan's you know, font editor that he's been working on, that's the thing that you just move it into the cartridge.
Oh,
you know.
and it's there's some software that automatically takes a small, and it has to be less than 8K, I'm guessing.
16.
16K. Okay.
Yeah, for this particular design, it would have to be less than 16K.
And it would automatically take a basic program and let it run from there.
Well,
Yeah.
Jeff Burrell, you wrote a
Maybe not
program.
automatically. You may have to do an out command.
No, Jeff wrote a program to take a basic program and turn it into an appropriate image for a ROM. Tom Woods documentation and his program will move it for you and put in the little prefix, you know, that it needs in order to automatically boot if it's a basic program.
I get it.
Yeah.
And there were two versions. One was the 32K only, and then a 32 or 64.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, what Joe was saying about a write protect switch, one of these switches is read write, and then the other switch selects whether it's in the dock or expansion ROM space. So if you wanted to change the expansion ROM, you could do that and program it into this and flip this switch and do development on your own computer, making those kinds of changes.
But David,
Yeah.
question: when you select the XROM location in this switch, you
Yep.
can disable the ROM. How you can do that? You need to add extra hardware modification inside the machine,
No, you
because
can do that
the
through
chunks is not free inside the machine.
I'll send you the documentation.
Okay.
I don't recall off the top of my head, but yeah, I'll send you the documentation.
Okay.
I'll just
Thank
put it
you.
up on the website and send it to you.
You're getting paper copies as well.
Yeah, yeah, but it's pretty nifty. It's one of these things that I knew existed. Having looked at a gazillion issues of newsletters and.
Yeah, Frank and I ended up with the last of that inventory.
Cool. So yeah, so Joe and I, probably have an iteration or two to go, and then, like Joe was saying, all of this stuff's going to go up on GitHub, so you can do it yourself, or if you're Randy, you can ask someone else to do it for you.
So while on the subject of the 2068 hardware and next stuff,
Yeah.
anybody here heard of Derek Stewart, who did the Q68?
No.
So he also did, how about the Q40 or Q60?
I recognize Q40.
So Peter Graff's the one who designed it, but Derek is the one who did the hardware build. He's currently been building the Q68, which is a small form factor QL clone.
Oh wow.
He's been on the Sinclair Sinclair QL chat. They have a Discord channel that ties up with the chat for the QL forum. And I was talking to him the other day. He is looking at other projects to work on, including doing motherboards for, like, he said he has some Jupiter Ace PCBs. He just he's redoing the PCB for the Aurora, which was is you take a gold card that plugs into the QL, throw away the QL, plug in the Aurora, and then you got a full working QL. If I remember
correctly. A lot better video.
Right. I mentioned to him that you guys were talking about a 2068 next, and he's like, "Oh, you have a dead 2068 board, because maybe I could redo the PCB."
Oh boy.
So if you're interested in doing a new PCB, we have someone who might be interested in doing that. All it would cost us sending him a dead 2068 board.
Yeah.
Or a working one, it doesn't have to be dead.
Yeah, but I think he's perfectly fine with the dead one, because all he's caring about is how the PCB is laid out.
Yeah.
So a dead one is more cheap, has less value, it's cheaper, than a live one. So I can always go back and ping him again and say, "Hey, we can get you one if you're interested in doing this." He was also talking about Amiga stuff. He's looking at different projects to work next. He just finished a build of a Q68s. So,
is he in the UK?
He is in the UK.
Okay.
In fact, I Googled him, and if you Google him, you'll find his LinkedIn page where it mentions the Q68, and it mentions where in the UK he is. I don't know exactly where myself. The name didn't ring a bell.
Okay.
Cool. But he's definitely a hardware guy.
Well, your mention of Dead 2068 reminded me of Randy's other issue that he went to, one of those vintage computer forum
fairs.
Thank you. And had a little display, and then when he got home, his 2068 got excessively warm and displays the signs of lower RAM failure. And I think I have at least one or two boards that have that problem. And so you know, those dynamic RAM chips that are in the 2068 are a little hard to come by. You know, they're a bit, Janeco has some right now, but they're a little hard to come by, and then they have that tendency to crap out at you know, when the voltage goes a little too high. So I asked around. I had known about this project for the Texas Instruments video chip, which uses the same RAM chips, and you know, has that same sort of problem. And somebody had done a design for the TI video chip, the 9918 chip, to replace those dynamic RAMs with a static RAM. And so, you know, I was looking at that, and then I mentioned it on the list, and somebody pointed me to a design that someone had done for the Spectrum, which was even less complex. And so I'll share my screen again because I still have that open as well. So let's switch to this tab. Okay, so this is, let's center that. This is the very, very simple design for the issue of adapting static RAM to a system that uses dynamic RAM is that the way that the address is given to the dynamic RAM chip is in rows and columns. So you can think of the memory in a dynamic RAM chip as a very large matrix. And you know, the first thing you do is say, okay, go to this row, and then another thing comes along and says, now go to this column, and at the intersection of those two things, you'll find, you know, either 1 bit or 4 bits that you need. And those things, you know, happen sequentially, like the row address comes first, and then the column address comes second. And in order to make, and it's static RAM, you just give it the full address, and it does the figuring out for you inside the chip. So you have to turn that row column mechanism into a full width. What is that? Up to 14, but it's only 12 in the or 13 in the 13 bits. 14 bits in the 2068. So you have to turn that into a 14-bit address. And that's what this this little 574 does. This chip right here is when there's a little signal here called row address strobe, and it goes through this buffer, which then tells this chip to grab that portion of the address and maps it over to A0 through A7, and then the column version, which is called CAS, gets mapped to 8 through 13, and then the column address strobe is used for the chip enable. That's what CE stands for. So some guy built this design, and it worked just fine in his Spectrum. Our thing is close enough to the Spectrum, at least on the hardware level, that this should work. And so I did a little board layout, and these two sockets over here are where these two sockets over here are where the RAM chips are inside of the 2068 board. And I did not even think about this for a second about whether this space to the left of those chips is clear. So there might have to be some extenders that go in order to make it work. But you know, if this works, it'll solve some problems for folks like Randy, and for a couple boards that I have where that lower RAM gets toasted. And you know, I guess it was common enough because there's at least 2 or 3 articles in the old newsletters about how to fix this. And the fix is pull out the chips and buy some new ones and put them in and test your voltage levels and etc.
And I presume that these chips are unobtainium now, or?
No, but they're becoming so. Like I looked on Janeco's website, and they say they have them in stock. It's a TI 4416 RAM chip. But they're hard to get, and other folks, other vintage computers use these. The Spectrum uses them, so you're competing against a lot of other vintage computer folks for that particular piece, that particular bit. So all right, y'all want to jump into talking about what we want our next computer to do?
Since I wasn't here and I haven't really caught up too much,
Yeah.
my first question is, how come you can't just make the next into a 2068?
Well, you can,
Oh, okay.
in theory. And one of the guys on that project asked on our 2068 group's email list, for the necessary information in order to do that. And Jeff, you replied that you had some FPGA stuff that that they might find useful, because that's what the next uses, is this giant FPGA. That depends upon the folks who are working on the next to actually do that work. And
Well,
So
and
that, I guess that, oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead,
next-
Jeff.
I was just going to say the next is also a $350-ish, maybe a little bit more expense, which is, a pretty big ask.
I got you. And
It's
it's not
also
available
the-
right now anyway, right?
It's
Right.
the availability that I think is the primary problem.
Yep. Brian, and Jeff, you're both correct. Is that the first round was a Kickstarter. There was some left over, and those were sold to people. The second round was a Kickstarter, and there may be some of those left over that get sold in the next shop. But that's, even in my opinion, that's even more unobtainium than 4416 chips.
So on the QL forum, I was talking to Derek in the chat. A guy in Scotland said, given that the Next already supports the Timex screen modes, has anyone tried running the Timex ROM? I know nothing about the Next, so I'm just kind of quoting what he said. So I don't even know if it supports the Timex screen modes. So
It
just
does
passing that along.
the screen modes, but it's one of the issues is the bank switching. I mean, the Next has bank switching in it, but it's based on, from my understanding, it's based on the way that the 128 does it, which is 16K blocks and some other details that I don't pay attention to.
Okay, so I'm just passing on what someone asked me, but I'm not a Next owner, so.
Oh yeah, no, trust me, I saw that, and I have a first edition from the first Kickstarter model, and I got excited because, like, oh, the modes are there, but then it won't run our software.
All right.
I wish it were that simple. Yeah. But yeah, and Jeff, you've done a little investigation into this, I think, is a polite way,
Yes.
a tiny bit of investigation for a number of years.
The thing is that it would be relatively inexpensive to clone the 2068 in an FPGA with a little bit of glue logic around it. That's not the issue. The question is, where do we go from there? Because the 2068 was okay for its time, but what would people like to see in something that would be, let's say 1990? Because the other thing you have to be aware of is if you stick with a Z80 or even an EZ80, the things are 8-bit processors. And if you start talking about large format, high color screens, that's moving a lot of data around for a Z80 if you're going to do it that way. And if you want to add a graphics coprocessor, that's doable. But again, that's a question as to what kind of price performance ratio would make it worthwhile to buy something like that without having to mortgage your house.
Also, I believe that spectrum compatibility would probably aid in its distribution possibilities.
Yes.
So like booting to a native 48K spectrum
Like a
mode.
dual boot machine.
Well,
My
we have
question,
the ROM switch available, so you could do that sort of thing too, to where you switch between the two ROMs.
Yep.
Well, I think it really comes down to anytime you're talking about some sort of next thing, you're talking about some sort of incompatibility. Not to say there's not backwards compatibility. Obviously, that could be done. It's the new thing that you're doing is not going to have really software for it, per se.
You know, Ryan and I, we've got together a couple times this past week, and we talked on the phone the other day for a few hours. And one of the things we talked about was this subject. And it was, I compared it, the closest I had for comparison was I stupidly upgraded from a Commodore 64 to a Commodore 128, thinking it was going to be so much better in like 1986 or whenever it was that it came out. And well, then no one ever wrote software for the Commodore 128, and all the advantages it had over the Commodore 64 were lost. So the first thing I did was I'd hold down the Commodore key when I turned on the 128, which booted right into the Commodore 64 mode. And I really never used the Commodore 128 mode except for, like, if I was programming in BASIC, it had a better BASIC on the Commodore 128. But really, I mean, later on in the 90s when I got into these computers again, I got some upgrades for the Commodore 128 that let me like go on the internet and 80 column mode and things like that and actually take advantage of it. But at the time of its release, there wasn't stuff for it. So who would be writing the software now?
So the difference between the 64 and the 128, the 64 had a disk drive. The 68 does not have a disk drive, right? And the 128 either came with a disk drive built in, or you would buy a disk drive. But both systems had a disk drive available, right?
Correct. Yeah.
The 128 had additional RAM that you could use as a RAM disk. And I did own a 128 back in the 90s ish.
Yeah.
And there was, some software like Synfile or something like that. There was some stuff that did take advantage of some of those additional features, but not, of course, not like, it didn't have the same window of development time for third-party folks that, the 64 did. Like the 64 came out in what,
82.
82? Okay.
82.
And people started writing software for it. And when did the 128 come out?
I think 85, maybe
85?
86, but I think 85.
Okay. And at that point, not to put too fine a point on it, but the 8 bits as as computers were kind of becoming less desirable.
Right.
In
fact, the Amiga also came out in 1985.
Yeah.
85, like November or something.
Yeah. And PCs, and PC clones had been, available. I mean, they certainly weren't that cheap in 85, but you had that to contend with, right? Do I buy this 128 or do I buy this PC? Whereas with the 68, storage is a problem, right? So I mean, that's an obvious jump up right there. Is some kind of system, some kind of solution that lets you put stuff on SD cards or USB drives. What Jeff was saying about different graphics modes, that would be pretty nifty. What kind of joystick interface? Do we put 9-pin Atari on that? Or, I mean, frankly, I don't know what the modern, joystick scene is like, so I have no clue. And what kind of video output option do you want? Would it be Is VGA okay? Is you can spit out DVI from some devices which HDMI will accept. You know, how much RAM do you want? Do you want to be able to, for instance, have a big pile of RAM and switch between you know, sort of one virtual machine and another? You know, that might be an interesting thing to have happen.
I think you could take the Q68 as an example where the Q68 it doesn't add a lot of extra features to a QL other
Okay.
than it does have SD storage. It does have built-in Ethernet because that was pretty easy, but I don't think the software is there to run it, but it has hardware built into the board.
Oh yeah, right.
It's just basically, as QLs get harder and more expensive to get, as they start having hardware problems, they start dying. The idea I think trying the Q68 was, let's just make new hardware that behaves a lot like the old one. It's faster. It's not as fast as a new PC is, but it's faster than the QL was. The SD storage is great. It does. I think it does HDMI, but I'm not too sure.
Okay.
But I know it does have the SD cards and it has Ethernet. I'm not sure if someone's doing something to get Ethernet working. But the fact that it's there on the board means that it's just a matter of writing drivers for it. The hardware is there.
Mm-hmm.
So doing something similar to the 2068, you could add Ethernet to it and then add the software later, such as a TCP stack that was done for the I think the Z88 or something.
Yeah.
Z80K was designed to create a stack to do Ethernet or TCP/IP on the Z88 or 8 bits. So, I mean, I like your idea of doing a RAM disk, so that way you can just have you got stuff in SD card. You also throw stuff in RAM disk and get it fast, save fast that way.
Yeah.
RAM's pretty cheap these days. So it's kind of like taking all those features you bought extra to the 2068 and just put them in one single package.
Yeah, true.
It doesn't have
Yeah, I
to
think
be all these bells and whistles extra, like, just new hardware, the features that you added on in the same package. And that might work for some people.
well, I think that shows that there are two main possible goals I see. One is exactly that you really just need something that is not such a bother to use, and to get around that, the hardware is aging in a way that's getting very difficult.
Mhm.
And so you make something, just like he said, that works like the old thing, but obviously you could easily have the convenience of, replacing physical drive mass storage with flash mass storage, etc., and maybe sprinkling in some easy connectivity to another computer for transferring
Yeah.
things possibly. But and then so there you have a thing that's like, okay, yep, that's kind of like, if I had the money back then, I could have had a system like this, but this is even better still because you got fast solid state and all that. And then there's the thing, and so obviously the Next is doing that job as well as the other thing, which is, okay, now let's add some more in terms of features. And obviously they wouldn't be calling it the Next if you didn't have that. And so my question that came up in my mind was then, okay, I don't have any connection with that community. Is that community doing anything with that part of that machine?
Yeah.
Or are they only using it in the first mode, which is it's just a freshly minted Spectrum?
It's
with
both.
modern video out, I guess, was the other obvious component, as he talked about too.
So I kind of pay attention to it. They're reasonably active on Facebook, and there is a lot of effort being put into making stuff that takes advantage of the new hardware. And I know in the Kickstarter, the first Kickstarter, I don't know about the second one, but in the first Kickstarter, there was this promise of, and we're going to give you a bunch of these games or whatever they were, that are going to be specific to, to the next. And a bunch of those did come out. I've never seen them because I'm just not that into playing video games like that. And then there's a couple folks who have been writing weird little pieces of software that take advantage of some of that new hardware. Like the Next has a Wi-Fi module in it, or can have a Wi-Fi module in it. And so somebody has written a news reader, not like an RSS reader, but actual like news headlines. It goes out to, I don't know, Google, and gathers headlines and stuff, and you can read, and keep up with what's happening on your Next. And it's like,
Well,
wow,
and
okay.
there was also an application that would allow you to log into a bulletin board to download software and do other things as well. So
Okay, yeah. So yeah, there's stuff like that. There's also,
Well, I think Carl was over here like last year, and he has a Next, and we
yeah.
hooked it up to my TV in the living room, and we ran some software that was written for the Next. I guess it has a mode that has more colors or something. I can't remember quite what it did, and so you can look at pictures on it. I mean, we didn't do too much with it, but that was pretty cool. I don't remember how many colors you can display. Does anyone know?
Jeff, is that probably the ULA plus mode?
that's one mode. Plus there is, I think 256 colors is the maximum, but they have several different video modes that it's like 256 colors out of a palette of I
16
think
million or
4K?
something.
yeah, I think it's more than 4K. I think it's 16K colors, something like that.
Okay.
But the thing is that I guess from what I'm seeing is that the 2068 doesn't have the kind of demo scene and support that the Spectrum does for new games, because there are still new games being written for the Spectrum. So, if we I guess the question is, do we look at this more as a preservation project where we have a device that will allow you to run 2068 software, but also give you the ability to say run Spectrum with good hardware emulation? One of the problems with running Spectrum software on the 2068 is that there's some port incompatibilities, but the biggest problem is the 50-60 hertz interrupt. And a lot of I've tried to run some Spectrum software on my 2068, and it craps out, I think, because it's expecting a 50 hertz interrupt rather than a 60. So, there are some issues there.
For the newer software, we could always talk to the authors and get a hold of the source code and see about porting it ourselves. It really isn't that difficult. Depending on, I know these a lot of different tools, and it depends on what tools they use. But if we talk, some of them aren't putting out the source code, some are. So something like that is possible. Again, if you look at the market for the Spectrum, it was like the number one computer in Britain, and in America, 2068 was the side note.
Yeah,
because they're only on the market for 3 months. Well, a little bit longer before it officially got canceled, but that was a vastly different worlds.
Yeah, that 50-60 hertz interrupt issue is a little bit more subtle than just changing, I think, than just changing a little bit of the source code, because the two clock frequencies are close enough that you can just basically call them the same. With a 50 hertz interrupt, you end up with more instructions per interrupt cycle than you get on a 50 hertz machine than you do on a 60 hertz. So if they're doing stuff in the background in, say, a demo scene, you may not have enough CPU clock cycles to just do what needs to be done at 60 hertz. So
it's always worth a try.
Oh, absolutely it is. But some of this demo scene stuff is doing things with the hardware that was never intended to do.
Yes. I am looking a bit more into what is done using that ZX Basic compiler, the Boreals compiler. And that should port over fairly easy. I mean, it just recompile on the 2068 version. Hopefully that'll work. I've been working on some other things. I want to get back to that eventually. If people do release the source code for their things that are done in that one. So a little bit on tracking down a few, I think have some source code available.
Okay.
And in case you're not familiar with what the ULA Plus is, Andrew Owen, who's not entirely clear to me, you know, where he lives in terms of Spectrum versus 2068, but he did for a long time some work developing this thing that he called ULA Plus, which, you know, extends the video modes of the Spectrum, and it includes Timex video modes. But you know, that thing you saw, Adam, with like the 256 colors, I believe that comes from the ULA Plus project. And there is some stuff that folks have done for that. I know that there is some stuff, but it's mostly in the next. There's another, the ZX Uno, and now there's a third version of the ZX Tray or something like that, that implements it. That's another FPGA ZX Spectrum clone extended thing.
The emulators for the system, they exist, right? Like for the next, can you emulate it? I don't think I bothered. Or it's
Yeah,
not that I
yeah,
haven't bothered. I just haven't looked into it.
ZSORX will emulate the next, and so will something called C-Spect, maybe, I think is what it's called, which is a Windows app. I believe some folks do their development with C-Spect.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the other things that was CPM, you know. It's a Z80. It's got, theoretically you can generate the video modes, and you have the, same amount of RAM, you got potentially storage, little CPM box. So you can run exciting business applications like WordStar.
I was going to say that, but I didn't want to, yeah.
Thrill them in it.
Well, that gets back to, I think, ultimately the purpose, right? Is that I was just thinking, like, well, the whether or not people start writing stuff that's Spectrum Next specific, I think isn't going to matter a whole lot if it's not very available, and then that's going to have a feedback effect of, but and then if you separately do what we kind of were talking about, was evolving the 2068 forward, it's like, well then, okay, well, if that's because there was talk about the video modes of getting at odds with the evolution of the Spectrum thing, it's like, well, yeah, maybe but, and then what are you going to do with it? Sure, okay, you could write a news reader of sorts, but are you really going to use that? Well, no. So that really kind of comes back to the purpose of these is just to write new games for, I think. It's ultimately, yeah, you could have other stuff, but ultimately the other stuff you're going to want to do really needs more hardware and stuff to do, and that's better left to other things. And so to me, it might be, one possibility in my mind was like, well, it would be enough if the Spectrum Next just properly supported to, say, preserve the 2068, as was referred to earlier, of, okay, I can have a machine that would run the 2068 stuff proper, and as it was on new hardware. And then you take the evolution thing on a separate track. To me, that almost says, given how much time has gone between now and then, that really needs to go on a new hardware. So to me, it kind of says it's something like some sort of, I don't want to say emulator really, because, then you're saying, well, I'm just emulating old hardware and I'm keeping myself stuck in, 8-bit address space, even with bank switching and all that. Just why would you bother? And just say, okay, what is the essence of all the rest if I were going to use that in some more modern, real way, and carry that on into some environment running on modern machines, and leave the classic games to the emulators and the Spectrum Next and whatever hardware things.
I think there's a point that what I like about the older hardware isn't as much the hardware physically, it's the operating system and everything. And for me, there's still a lot to learn with the ZX81 and the 2068. There's a lot out there that I don't know, so I still like to explore on the existing. I don't see a need for me to have any new features. If I want web browser, I've got a laptop for that. I got a desktop for that. But I like tinkering with that. Maybe learning more about Z80 assembly language. Playing more with C on the ZX81s. But that's what I've been doing lately. Doing things that this is interesting, but if I did it on a different platform, it'd be a whole lot more work. So let me just keep the platform limited and work on there. It's like saying if you wanted to write a text editor, but if you only got 16K, you have to be nice, concise, and how you do it. Versus like, well, I got umpteen million megs of memory and so many gigahertz of speed. I can really write bad code. So there's still a lot to explore in those environments.
I just remembered that there's this I don't know, not a clone per se. I believe that something about the Spectrum Next is open in some respect. It's an open source system, but I'm not entirely positive. What I do know is that there's a thing called an NGO, which is, I'll bring one up on my screen here and show y'all. It's kind of funny. I think it filled the issue of not being a participant in the Kickstarter, right? But you still wanted it, right? And so whoever did this came up with this little thing, and the case you can see probably is it's a laser cut case, and then it's held together with like these funky little rods and stuff. It's got a full size keyboard, and they've printed the little little legends on the keycaps. But you can also just get the board, and the board is roughly the size of a regular Spectrum board, except that it has those two 9-pin connectors down front, which makes it a challenge to shoehorn into a Spectrum case. But the power connectors over on the right hand side, in like a Spectrum, the edge connector is over here. You've got USB and the two audio connectors, and then you've got your video connectors on the far left. So you can take a Spectrum case and hack it and make it fit, and even down to the point of the keyboard jumpers are in the right locations for the way that the Spectrum keyboard matrix is set up.
So would that also work inside the 1500?
It would, right? Because 1500 is a Spectrum case. So yeah, you could you could get a 1500.
I quite like that keyboard though.
Isn't that a nice keyboard? I wonder how much.
Why I would stick this into a Spectrum case, to be honest.
I'll put this in the chat so you guys can get to it. So what about form factor? I mean, if they can shoehorn the Next into a Spectrum compatible size board, and this board is 145 euros. I don't know what that translates into American units, but freedom units. but I think it's like 145 bucks.
They're about the same.
About the same now.
0.94 euro to the dollar.
Okay.
Again, I think it's how available it is.
So Ryan, that keyboard is available separately, and it is 84 euros. I'm gonna drop that link in the chat as well. Yeah, that's a nice keyboard. That's a real nice keyboard. Jeez Louise. So what about form factor? I mean, what do you think? Something, I'm looking to my left because that's where my 2068 is. Something you can drop into a 2068 case, and you take your dead motherboard out and use your 2068 keyboard, or do you want to use a real keyboard?
Come on, David. I still have hope Carl can fix mine.
Oh, right. Yeah, Carl, fix yours. By the way, that's going to go in the notes, and I'm going to send it to Carl. The note said Carl will fix Ryan's computer. But what about physical format? I mean, do you want something you could stick in your 2068 case, or do you want a separate box of some sort and you just plug a regular PC?
I know what I want it not to be. I don't want it to be as small as the Apple iWatch. My wife got one of those about a week ago, and it's pretty small. And I want something bigger.
So you don't want a teeny tiny little OLED screen?
I don't.
Well, the sad part is that OLED screen's got more resolution, and you could, if they wanted to, they could actually hook up. You'd probably hook up Bluetooth keyboard to connect to it as well.
I can't see it, but that's nice.
So Adam, which arm do you wear the watch on?
Which one do I wear it on?
Yeah.
Even though I'm right-handed, I wear it on my right, which I guess goes against the law somewhere. But
so then you can get a little tiny keyboard module and put a couple straps on it and put it on your arm, and you can just type on your.
This is an excellent idea. This is so good.
I wonder if
I'm writing this down right now.
Hey, we laugh, but don't you remember those things in the 80s and 90s? Just that we're trying to do things like that. The watches that had remember the Seiko watch that had the black and white TV screen, but the TV module was completely separate. You were just hooking the video out to the watch.
Yep.
Well, that reminds me, yesterday, Ryan and I went to about 6 yard sales and 2 estate sales, and we ran across some weird, like, electronic stuff. And one of the things Ryan saw, I didn't notice it, was when he showed it to me, was like an electronic diary that ran on like a couple of AA batteries or something, right, Ryan? Was that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like,
yeah,
they were trying to figure out
those.
what to do with this technology as they made it smaller. And the form factor of that thing looked, I mean, it didn't look too usable. And I don't know what happened to your diary when you turned it off, but it was probably from the mid-90s or something like that. And there's all sorts of weird electronics. And, Ryan picked up a couple of old, what am I trying to say? Calculators. Yeah, he got one from the 70s. There's one right there.
Oh, what is that, Ryan? Hang on, let me spotlight you.
Oh, I forgot what year. I looked it up, but I can't remember what year.
Turn it on to show like the screen display. It's awesome.
Oh, that's nice.
Oh, that's not reverse Polish notation, though.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Oh,
I was surprised it worked, but it did.
I'm surprised Ryan didn't, type in any of the magic phrases for us.
It's got an equal sign. It's not RPN.
That's damn right.
Down with RPN.
Well, I got a HP. It's not RPN too.
Oh, hello. So. You didn't get that at a garage sale, did you? Or at a state sale?
Yeah, I had to fix it too.
Oh my God.
Oh man.
Wow.
Because the keyboard membrane, just like a lot of our computers, membranes connect with the membrane. Only it's just mashed up against the circuit board, and the little foam pad was weak, so you have to go in and I just put some more stuff behind it, and then it works again. But it's a business calculator though.
Oh,
again, Ryan is failing.
So it's not a real calculator then. but doesn't do complex arithmetic. Yeah.
That's not a real calculator. Oh, this is a real calculator. And
It's
every
Crocodile
feature
Dundee
known,
calculator.
every feature known to man, apparently.
Which one is that?
It's actually,
AG. Okay.
they had later versions that had more functions, I'm sure, but
Wow.
well, battery's getting low. Let me tell you, the RPN actually starts to work when you've got more than one line.
Yep.
No, real calculators don't need batteries.
Hey, I threw
Oh.
one away that had a phony solar.
Oh, nice.
You have one of the, oh, cool.
I don't know what the hell that is.
I
That's
had
like
one
a-
of those when I
That's
was in
the
high
adding
school.
machine.
Yep. And you basically,
you're-
it's called additor. And you basically take a stylus and you add by going up and down on the rows. And you
If you
clear it
see-
and just lift this up.
Well, yeah.
I got this at the Vintage Computer Fest years ago. Real cheap. The guy had a bunch of them for sale. I think there's some made in the late 60s.
Middle to late 60s.
And didn't they make a similar sort of thing that you took with you to the grocery store when you were grocery shopping?
Oh
You
yeah, the
know,
clicker
The
thing. Yeah.
tally? Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Look
The
in the
tally.
instructions
What are
here
we
for a
talking
date
about
or
here?
something.
Like,
well, the annihilator you could subtract. The clicker you couldn't.
Right. It was just a right.
The annihilator. That's craziness. Are you
it
gonna
makes
show
the
something?
26 look
Sorry,
very
I don't know what
advanced,
that is.
doesn't it?
But you're
Well, the
right. A
company
real
was
real calculator doesn't need
Vescosa from
batteries.
Campbell and is made in West Germany. Doesn't say a price right off, but I think it was from the late 60s, just by the looks of it.
Yeah, but with an addilator and a slide rule, you can do a lot. I had that when I was in high school.
Really?
I've
The
got slide
annihilator?
rules in the garage.
Well, it was a knockoff, but yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
So I used that with my
Anybody
slide rule.
know what this is?
That's a circular, is that an aviator computer?
Exactly. It's
Really?
not a
Okay.
circular slide rule, but it's the EB6, E6 Bravo. And then the other side is where you do your winds and calculation
Okay.
of which way you need to go, as far as what angle you into the wind to get where you want to go. So I think they don't really sell these anymore, but they might. Bought that back in the late 80s.
That's craziness. And I thought slide rules were, off the hook in terms of challenge.
Careful.
Have you
Challenge.
guys ever seen
So-
those circular cylinders slide rules?
The Curtis?
The
I don't know what
Curtis,
they're
yes.
called. Yeah.
Yeah.
They look-
I knew a
they
guy
look
that
good.
had one of those and used it back in the 60s. He did geodetic surveys. And it was the best way to do calculations. You're out in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
I think they call it the pepper grinder.
Yeah, because of the little.
'Cause you
Turny.
need, yep.
What did the handle do?
So you would rotate, you'd dial in your number, and to multiply, you would just crank once.
Uh-huh.
So if you multiply 10, you would crank it 10 times. If I remember correctly, he had one and showed me it, but it was as you crank it more, the number increases.
Huh. Huh. Yeah, all I know is that they're tremendously expensive now.
Yes. Well, they stopped making them back in the 40s or 50s, I think. So,
Yeah.
and they were expensive probably back then.
Yeah, I have to crank my 2068 once in a while too to keep it going. Works pretty good.
I
Get the
think I
little
lost my
generator down
crank.
beneath.
Just put a battery in it, Adam.
Oh yeah. Speaking of 2060 powered, David, what
Yeah.
is the coax size of the power plug?
I'm sorry. Did you want to know? Oh, hang on. Let me.
What is the size of the 2068's coax?
Off the top of my head is 5.5 on the outside and 2.5 on the inside.
Yeah, it's certainly not 2.1.
And it's 2.5.
Okay.
I only remember this when I look it up to order the connectors themselves.
Yeah, as Adam knows, I picked up one of these, and of
Yep.
course it's the wrong
You got
It's a smaller
2.1.
size. 2.1.
Okay.
He got that at the estate sale for like, how much was it? Like a quarter or something stupid? Something ridiculously cheap.
A couple dollars probably. But yeah, to get the right one of these so far is the 10. So I might as well just buy Dave's power supply.
Well, yeah, I mean, Ryan, do you have any?
Which I guess
desire to
was the
solder?
question. But yeah, I mean, I could replace the end on this, I suppose, but I just gotta get the part. My question though was that correct though, right?
Yeah, an amp will
Yeah.
do the trick.
Because because I measured this, then it was giving pretty much 15 volts, whereas my 2068 power supply is putting out like a lot.
But in the polarity, you need to check is positive out.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I know
Yeah.
that, but it was, what was it giving me?
or
I know it's supposed to give a little bit high, but it was like 21 or something. It was.
Yeah, that's
Seemed like
unloaded. As soon as you plug it in, it drops down.
Yeah.
So the switching one behaves differently. Okay.
switching
Right,
one
yeah.
puts out.
The switching one's going to be 15 volts no matter what, but the old analogs, they always ran high when they were unloaded.
Yeah,
If
no
you put a
load.
load on it, they drop right down.
Well, I knew that. I just thought it seemed like a little high, but okay.
I don't know. That sounds like about right. 18 to 20 some odd volts for the 15. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I remember, coming across that back in the 80s, measuring our bricks, right? And thinking, what the heck? And then, what Joe said. I quickly learned about, that these things can switch down to what you expect them when they're loaded. But yeah, I remember measuring my power supply for my 1000 and thinking, is this thing working properly? And I'm like 13, 14. It's like, so it's a terrifying moment.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but those switching power supplies they're so awesome. They're so, just rock solid. And even I think a year back or so, or maybe even 2 years ago, Carl had found these little tiny modules that you can put inside your 2068 to replace there's a switching power supply in the 2068 for the 5 volts, and it's old, and it's got a bunch of capacitors that
You
are
mean it's
attached.
linear? You mean it's linear, right?
What's that?
You said you mean it's linear, right? In the
Well,
2060.
the power going into the 2068 is linear, is a
Yeah.
linear power supply. Inside the 2068, there's 2 power supplies. For 12 volts, it uses a one of these
78L12.
yeah. And what's the word for that?
It's a linear regulator.
Thank you, linear regulator, right? And it's the size of a transistor. So, and it's a really, because it's so small, it can only supply a certain amount of
Current.
microamps current. Yes. And the 5-volt power supply uses this TI chip to turn the voltage. Paul, I'm going to spotlight you for a second. Don't move. It uses this chip that is over on the right hand side of Paul's screen. So you see those 2 large capacitors. Those are part of the power. So you don't have to move, Paul. And this little black chip below those two capacitors is a switching power supply inside the 2068 that generates the 5 volts. It also has the op amp for the speaker, and that's probably where all that hiss comes from on your speaker. Yeah, you can come back, Paul. You're not blocking the view.
Hey, while he's rambling, I'm letting him go.
Anyway, Carl identified these teeny tiny little modules, little postage stamp module that generates both the 12 volt and the 5 volt. And you can rip out, all of this stuff, you don't have to rip it out, but you can take out most of those parts and replace it with this modern thing. What you lose is the op amp for the speaker. And so you lose your internal speaker. So my computer doesn't hiss anymore.
There's a module to replace that too, because I lost that chip on one of mine. It just burned right out.
Yeah.
And I ended up trying to find that replacement that was in the list. They had the 12 and the 5 at the same time, and I couldn't find it anywhere. I couldn't buy it at the time.
Yeah, it sort of disappeared after a while.
Yeah, so I ended up kind of shoehorning 2 different modules in there, a 12-volt regulator and a 5-volt regulator, and then a little op amp module, and just kind of dead bug wired them up, and then everything worked. It was great. So, and my video improved immensely, getting rid of that chip. So with that chip dying, actually improved my machine.
Yeah, the 12-volt regulator, it supplies reference voltage to the video modulator chip, and so that's probably part of the reason why the 2068 display is so noisy. And yeah, mine cleared up a fair amount. I mean, it's not perfect, but it cleared up a fair amount when I replaced the internal voltage regulation. Hey, Paul, I am going to ask you to duck out of the way because I want to show exactly what Joe was talking about. So Joe said that he dead bugged some stuff in, and right sort of smack in the middle to the left of the Z80 below the square chip, which is the SCLD, there is this chip on Paul's circuit board that's at a rakish angle. And that is what's called a dead bug, where you just, throw a chip onto the board, maybe glue it down, and you got wires running all over the place, just like Paul does. You can come back, Paul. Paul, you're very useful today. Okay, so we didn't really talk about what what kind of form factor, whether it would be, except not so small that you can wear it on your wrist. I think we eliminated that. But what about, is it a thing that you can fit into into your 2068? Now, part of the challenge there is, you've got the joysticks on either end, and you've got the cartridge port over here, and across the back you've got a bunch of connectors, and you've got that edge connector. Well, I mean, look at the circuit board behind Paul. It's huge. Whereas a potential replacement would probably not be that size. Or is it something that is smaller and sits in a separate box, and you use a off the shelf?
I think it definitely should be not need to fit inside the case of a 2068, because if you have a 2068, then you could just repair it. Why would you really need to?
Well, there are dead 2068s out there. I mean, I haven't seen them show up on eBay in a long time, but from reading newsletters, this used to be like an epidemic. Paul, maybe you can speak to this. I mean, it seemed like people were killing their 2068s an awful lot back in the 80s.
We did fix some, but not as many as we did QLs.
Okay. And when you fixed them, I mean, what was the issue that you ran into?
A lot of them were power related.
Okay.
At that time.
All right.
And sometimes we had to, socket a lot of the chips in order to get them going.
Yeah, I see you've socketed the chips on this board. So, and the capital area Timex Sinclair user group did a bulk buy of SCLD chips from Portugal at one point. They got like 100 SCLD chips, and people snapped them up because they were under the impression that that's what died in their computer. I mean, Paul, do you recall?
I have one with a dead SCLD.
Do you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's the symptom? Does it not generate video or
Black screen,
black screen? Okay.
right? So, and I actually had to pull out the oscilloscope and go over each pin, and there were some address lines that were just there's just no
Yeah.
signal.
Yeah, they were dead.
Okay. Okay.
I think that's the thing happened to mine. Mine died within 6 months of getting it, thereabouts. And so, and I bought the schematic, took it to a local computer store, gave him the schematic, gave him the machine. He goes, "These don't match. I can't fix it." So, and there really no one in the Bay Area at the time who was doing any 2068 repairs. So,
Yeah. 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 Well, and the Spectrum folks are maybe masochists because they're really attached to their rubber squishy keyboard. And so for them, maybe, it makes a lot more sense to have a drop-in replacement.
Well,
I
that
just-
is the thing of, just like with classic cars, right? You have the ones that want to restore it to the way it came out of the factory, and then the ones that are like, yeah, but that's not very comfortable or whatever, right? And you want to like upgrade it. So yeah, I mean, I would be perfectly happy with, that thing you showed earlier. Something had a keyboard, a nice keyboard, doesn't have to fit in the case. It just does the thing. In the sense that it's, it's a variant of what you might have had back in the day. It was quite common, especially in the 1000 days, right? Which was, be in the catalogs there and like, ooh, that's a lovely keyboard. Can't afford that. Okay, But you would play. It'd be a nice separate box, and you would take your circuit board out and put it in that box, and you wouldn't give your case another look after that.
Oh boy.
Well, how important is the cartridge port and the expansion connector?
For me, I mean,
SD card, the cartridge port could be replaced basically by SD card.
Right.
Yeah.
But the expansion connector, I think, is almost one of the best parts about it because it allows you to experiment. Using a modern little Raspberry Pi or Arduino or something like that, you're not down at the hardware level. There's all these libraries and that kind of stuff, and you're not actually, I don't know, flipping bits. Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a whole different level of understanding of a machine. I'd like to keep that level if possible. That would be ideal as a training or as a, kind of like an educational tool.
So
you
maybe
just don't have that with a Raspberry Pi. You just don't. Anyway, I dropped something in the chat there.
Yeah, I'm gonna put this on the screen.
Okay.
It's really cool.
Oh yeah.
Isn't that nice? I mean, but again, it's faithful to to the Spectrum world where you've got a space key.
Yeah,
the layout is very, very.
That, I guess I'll vote for, hey, any improvements in the keyboard are fine by me. Like, the separate, like in the emulator, boy, I love you being able to use the arrow keys as aliases for shift arrows, right?
Yeah, that's a good
And
point.
having a real space bar. I mean, did we forget how the 2068 was laid out?
Right.
That space bar was, always fond of that.
And a couple of nice shift keys, one on the left and one on the right. Yeah. And I designed a drop-in circuit board that will take cherry key switches because of the weird space limitations that the original keyboard has. You can't get a full size shift key in there. You have to get, you know, some fraction like a 1.25 or maybe a 1.5 on the left hand side. So what I did was I just moved those two keys down a little bit, but the rest of it fit just fine. But it's hard to find, you know, it's hard to find the right kind of keycaps. You can order WASD keyboards, and there's another one. I can't remember the name of the other company. They're both in the US, and you just send them a SVG file. They give you Inkscape template files, and you can just order, you know, custom keycaps, but they're full height, which is a little tall. And I have found, actually, I'll show you what I've got. I have found these sort of super low height switches, and then also low height, low profile keycaps. Let's see if I can share from my phone. There we go. Oh, is it letting me do it? Oh yes, I have to. Oh, I think I have to turn off.
Disappears.
I have to turn off my background. We'll find out in a second here. Cool. Okay, so here's this keyboard that I did for my 2068. And I'll pull this little thing out so you can actually see the circuit board. I can't pull this out because it's screwed in, but you can see this, you know, weird cavity, and then underneath it there's some other sort of restrictions that make life difficult. Oh yeah, over here on the left is the real challenge. You know, there's this cutout for putting in a you know, the switch, and if I want to move this shift switch up, I'm going to have to put in a smaller shift button, which is kind of a challenge. So that's why. And also it's impossible to find, you know, a key that says shift on it. So I've got tab, and then for my enter it says caps. This is my symbol shift, and then the escape is the break key, which is also just a, you know, a space key in the Sinclair world. So yeah.
Are you going to put the like the overlay stickers on top of that eventually, or are you just going to, you memorized it all and what you're doing there?
What I have is I use let's do a video. There we go. I have a little reference card that I use to look up. And the funny thing is that many of the functions, just remember them. You know, I've got this, you know, you know, muscle memory for those functions.
Well, Dave, that sticker set, well, I'm sure you've got it, right?
Oh yeah, the sticker set. I'm not fond of that.
I mean,
it's okay.
Well, I mean, certainly the break space label would go over your escape key.
Well, actually, I have some other
stuff like that.
I think that profile is called XDA that I'm using now, and I've ordered some other keycaps in that size, but in different colors. Like, so I think I have a red one that I can use for the break. I just haven't put it on there yet. But that's, you know, while I like the 2068 keyboard, I like a cherry switch far better.
Are these the cherry switches you're using?
No, those are let me just spotlight you for a second. Those are, what's the name of that design? That's a different design. That's
Cherry MX variety, but the keycap actually recesses down in there, so it's very low profile.
Yep. Yeah, the keycap I have is similar to that. Yep. Yeah, looks like about the same profile.
They're only that tall.
Yeah, really, really low. Yep, it's nice. It's a nice size keycap. That switch that you had, Joe, that has a different pinout than Cherry's, the Cherry MX, I think.
I thought these were labeled cherry.
Okay.
Yeah, they're labeled cherry.
Okay.
I don't know if they're knockoffs or whatever.
Right. Right.
It was a salvage keyboard. It was, but yeah, they snap into the same hole.
Mhm.
You know, the same size hole. So I had printed off a plate on the 3D printer
Yeah.
to
hold them.
hold them. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I used a printed circuit board, and the 1.6 mil sort of standard thickness for printed circuit boards is, it's almost exactly the right thickness for pushing those keycaps into, or key switches into. All right, so Ryan, you were saying separate box, but you want some kind of keyboard, Ryan.
Oh, well, I'm just saying is that, I can see, wanting to put it into an original case. But then you get into, well, but then if I guess it depends on the things that you add and finding places that, do you got to drill another hole for an SD card or whatever kind of thing. But then again, original, like you were saying with the Spectrum, original case means rubber keys. But then what I was saying to that was that, yeah, but some people want that, other people don't.
Yeah.
So, I imagine you could make maybe you could make some board that can go in a case if you want, but you could obviously put it into something else potentially. Maybe a way to go. Maybe that's too difficult. I don't know.
Well, it's kind of what they did with the Spectrum. You know, they came up with was it the 2 Plus? The one with the movable keys, but it was still the same board on the inside.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, if we made a new board that could fit in the old case, and then also came up with a design for a new case that could either house an old board but give you a better keyboard, that'd be like the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I think I kind of like the idea of, designing a case that you could rehouse. Well, I don't know, maybe not. Yeah, I guess you could. Well, obviously you could do it if you made it compatible. Is that it could hold the old board, but also make it easy to put in a better keyboard
Mm-hmm.
and other things potentially.
Mm-hmm. But and Joe, you also mentioned, having that rear expansion connector as a pretty desirable thing.
Oh, definitely, especially if we could make it compatible with all the old cards like the bite back, relay boards,
Mm-hmm.
and the analog to digital input boards.
Mm-hmm.
And there were there's other things out there.
Yep. Yep.
And we also talked a little bit about, because the thing that came into my head a little bit was when y'all were talking about these new cards and things of like, and then we talked about well, it was what do we call it, that expansion bus connector for experimenting.
Right, the rear expansion bus.
So like you plug that in, and then you could add these cards, but they're edge connector style. And I think we kicked around a little bit the idea of like, hey, could we just is it possible to make that some sort of standard, or at least amongst 2068? And then there was other talk of like, okay, well, could you maybe make that a bit more of an expanded unit that like did plug onto the back, that you could put those in, and we could make these little cards that would slot in, so you get a little bit of an Apple II feel, I suppose. But then also, we were talking about, okay, well then you wouldn't want to pass through edge connector, obviously, but then you could also have the edge connector that's twisted.
For the Spectrum, right?
So it would just be sort of this expansion box that basically had the twister in it. So you'd have a Spectrum edge and a 2068 edge, and then you'd have the little experiment slots as another sort of thing into which then people could design these cards that would plug into that for various peripherals. But there was also talk of like, well, how easy it'd be to build in a lot of functionality, into it, or into one card, right? To have just some of the standard things, and I think I mentioned that being akin to the old notional 2060 expansion unit, I guess, whatever it was called.
The BE box.
Yeah,
What was the original term?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, though, most of that would be most of what that box would be incorporated in better and faster storage, better video, and
additional RAM.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Which doesn't take away from your point about wanting to have an expansion connector. It's just that at that point, it becomes less about making the machine easier to use, but more about allowing some people, a la Stewart and what he was thinking about with the 1000, to have a hobbyist friendly prototyping digital type experimenter system.
Good point.
Yeah. Oh, so you're saying kind of like have like all that nice to have stuff to make it nice, serial port or whatever it is, better video, that's sort of built in, but then you can then layer on all the other experimenting things, or
and there's probably wisdom in being able to use things like the old floppy interfaces as well, just to allow archiving. And I doubt anyone would really go back to using floppies once they had a more modern storage solution, but certainly it'd be nice to get that stuff in.
Yeah.
Although people like Gustavo, they like their floppies still, right?
And Willie.
Yeah.
Sorry, Willie.
Well, there's a lot to be said for this.
I won't take it personal.
Just because he's trying to market the hardware.
Well, the thing with floppies, there's a lot to be said for the sort of the spatial memory, in the sense that here's my file.
Yeah.
I know where my file is. It's on here. Now, the problem with floppies, of course, was that, well, it's on there, but good luck getting it off of there. But
you become very good at backing up.
Yeah, but at least it was, I guess, better than the old well, save it twice and cross your fingers.
Save it twice, flip over the cassette, save it on that side too. All right, cool. Well, I think we've talked about all the things that I could imagine. Were there any other ideas y'all have, or do you want to talk about other stuff?
I have some completely off topic.
Okay, cool.
So a long time ago, we talked about the ZX Vespi board.
Yep.
To hook your 1000 up to the internet, basically, and also provide video.
Yeah.
So if anybody's tried that and utterly failed numerous times, like I did, it finally dawned on me that everybody that was using this was using it as a PAL machine. It was PAL video, and it is absolutely tied to the 50 hertz signal. You have to run the ZX81 or the TS1000 in PAL mode, and I think it's resistor 38 has to be lifted. So I did that, and everything worked. It just worked immediately.
Oh,
So if anybody's tried that and played with it and said, "Oh, this whole project is junk, it doesn't work," no, it has to be run on PAL. So
Interesting. So,
side note.
but what? No, and you know who? Larry, who's not here today, he has done at least the, you know, the non-video version of
Right.
that. And he was experiencing some of the same problems.
Yeah, it's still on the back.
Oh, maybe
So-
show us. You were gonna say something, Jeff?
I was wondering,
Right.
yeah, Joe, what are you using for a video display for? Oh, I see. Okay, so you have
Right
a
there.
little.
So yeah, so that's it. That is my ZX81 issue 1 board, so you know it works with
Yeah.
everything. But yeah, I actually had to add basically a switch to flip between the two. So yeah,
And Joe, that little extender between your 81 and your Z Expand.
I bought a box of those. They were the printer cable
Oh,
from. They were literally just cut right off the old ZX printers, and I think I bought 5 or 6 of them. And that's a really old project where I took off all the stuff, and it gave me access to the signals, and that's a little reset switch that you can
oh,
get. But
wow.
yeah, so
And is that a TI keyboard?
yes, that's
Okay.
one of the TI keyboards.
Now, is that one with the circuit board underneath it, or with the Mylar matrix?
Nope, that's a circuit board.
Okay.
Yeah, this was actually a bad one that I had to replace on a TI with the Mylar one that I bought at Radio Shack back when they were $5.
Yeah.
So this keyboard wasn't working, but it ended up in a box, and then it got converted to this. But I fixed somebody's TI because their keyboard wasn't working.
Oh, wow. And what did you
so-
do for the little keycap stickers?
Laser printer.
Uh-huh.
They're just something I did in I paint probably a long time ago, and then printed them off on a laser printer, and I painted the keycap and then glued these on there.
Oh yeah, because those are white, and the TI
those-
would have been.
That was done many years ago. So yeah,
Wow.
and you can see it's actually held up. I used a lot of clear spray on top of them.
Little clear
and
coat.
held
Okay.
up over the years. But yeah, but that's yeah. Sorry, I said 38. It's R30. R30 has to be lifted.
Okay. To switch
So
to
I actually wired it up so I have a little switch off to the side so I can go NTSC or PAL.
Oh, okay. What's that circular thing on the side? Right near your fingers.
That
Yeah.
that is just a screw that holds down the wire.
Oh, okay.
Again, this was made long before I had 3D printers, or well, this part wasn't. Obviously that's new.
That's newer. Okay.
Yeah, the rest of it is something I put together many years ago.
That's cool.
That's the
Westby.
right.
Wow.
So
That's really cool. And is
but
that
it's very handy. So now I have a ZX81 laptop.
Now, have you incorporated a Fresnel like in Brazil, the movie?
oh my God. Yes. You need a little motion, Fresnel lens. That's
Yep.
right. That's awesome. That's cool, Joe. That's really cool.
But yeah, it was just frustrated me. It was a project I kept working on and then putting up, and could not figure out why it wouldn't work. Everything seemed to be working, but it just would not sync, and I couldn't get any data to it. And it was all a matter of it had to be running in 50 hertz.
And where did you get the circuit board for the Westby? Did you do that yourself?
Oh no, that's a online project. You can actually order this board that the
ESP
ESP32 it's on, but you don't have to do that. I did another one. No, yeah, it's still here. Same thing, right? It's just a matter of wiring it up.
Okay.
Yeah, I did the same thing on here. And this is one of the prototype ones that I could never get to work. So once I figured out that, oh, it's a 50 hertz thing, then I went ahead and ordered that board from one of the board fabs.
Is the code available for the?
Yeah, it's all out there.
So do you think that a change could be made to the code to work at 60, or is
Yeah, but the code is way beyond me. So that
okay.
Yeah, I'm not a good coder. But I could not figure out where to resync that timing.
How is it that we have so many people who programmed on Timex computers who are not good coders?
Because BASIC is very different than C.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, when I did the extra coding for the bulletin board, I actually used Sinclair News, and Basil Wentworth and I went back and forth in public on debating on the best way to do it.
And what in the newsletter?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sort of like the letters to the editor.
Yeah.
So I'd pose the question and then he'd reply, and I'd bounce back at him.
Yeah.
He did it the way I wanted to anyway.
Yeah.
So how long did that take? Over how many issues? So I'm guessing that was monthly, and
Well, that came out like quarterly, I think.
oh my gosh.
But he was also coming to our user group meetings.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How many folks?
Pretty quick, because I don't remember you taking that long to do that little section.
No, it didn't.
It didn't take us, I should say you, when you wrote that. It was all fitting that in a rim line. I remember that, and it wasn't very long at all.
Was that the code to talk to the modem?
Yeah.
Well, it filtered out the non-printable ASCII.
Okay. Okay. Wow.
I got a quick question. Anybody have a Z88?
Yes.
No, but wouldn't that be nice?
I've got some Z88 books I'm looking to get rid of.
I already have them. Although I have a couple of extra Z88s that I'm not going to do anything with.
Do they work?
I think one or two of them do.
Oh,
The others, I didn't dig into them to find out why not.
Yeah. Tim, you had a Z88 for a while, right?
I had 3, gave one away. One was broken for the broken screen. I'm not sure what I've got right now. And at one point I had just the spare board, kind of junky, I think, that someone gave me. But I might still have one running around that had the broken screen.
I may have a good screen for you then.
Haven't really used one in a while, so I don't know. And then I think this one actually broke when I was in Ohio. That was probably in the mid 90s.
And
So
it hasn't hurt you since, huh?
Yeah, well, so I had one, then I got a second one. I used that on BART when I was first commuting back in the late 90s on BART. So that was kind of handy, but I don't commute anymore, so at least not on BART. So, but it was really handy. I liked having the topper because, believe me, you couldn't really use it without the topper.
What was
Uh,
the topper?
So if you pressed on the keyboard, the machine would crash.
What?
So if you put
What
it in,
does that
put it in
mean?
like
If you were carrying it around or slinging it here and there.
if you had a book on top of it
Yeah.
and like put it, so you put it in like your backpack with a book compressing against it, it would crash the machine. So the topper prevented that. The piece of plastic went over the top of the Z88 as a like not a clamshell, but just a top, and that prevented the machine from crashing. It
Oh.
really was no way to use it without that
Wow.
function.
Did this come with it?
Carry it around.
It was a key, like a keyboard protector, but it form fit the top of the machine.
Right. And I also found that in the 90s, people didn't assume you had a laptop because I went into the 509th Squadron. So these are the 509th did the B2, and I was working the B2 program. I had my Z8, my laptop, went into their office and mentioned the fact that, oh yeah, you couldn't bring computers into this office. I'm like, oh, okay. Never turned mine on, never said a word, then took it out with me. I'm like, if I say that I've got it, it's going to disappear. So I'm going to say, I don't have it. I'm not saying anything. I'm not turning it on, and just walk out with it a couple hours later. So,
Tim, was that area where they had the signs "Deadly Force Encouraged"?
no, this is at Whiteman when I visited the B2 school. So I was in the B2 program. Excuse me. I visited Whiteman Air Force Base and the plant in Palmdale, and also the Northrop Grumman's design facility there in Pico Rivera. So I got a tour of the plane and saw things that I can't talk about.
Really? Still?
They're on display at Wright Pat.
I've never seen certain features talked about or displayed, so I've never talked about them.
Wow. So Tim, you said you think you have one that might still work?
I have to go look. I'm not too sure. Yeah.
Okay.
But I basically was looking through my stuff. I'm kind of downsizing some of my collections. I basically found a bunch of that's the dab hand guide, the BBC basic reference guide for the Z88, real Z8 power computing, and so on. So
Okay.
I'm like, yeah, I kept them. But like,
can I bring something up
could do
about
for you.
the downsizing to Tim and actually to the whole group? So in July, a friend of mine on the East Coast passed away, and his family this week contacted me. They wanted to like basically give me all of his things, and I declined because I did that once before. And now I have too many things already. I was wondering, like, I mean, at our ages and stuff, I mean, I'm not saying we're all going to kick the bucket tomorrow, but do you think, like, what made you decide to downsize, and what's the best way to do it? I mean, maybe this would be a topic for an upcoming episode.
Dave, so he can sell it.
So for me, so I was collecting stuff. I topped out at 50 computers. Then I'm like, okay, I don't really need some. So I had to downsize a few when I left Ohio. I got rid of my PDP-11 and my ASR-33. But I'm realizing that I'm not really into the hardware that much. I've had this stuff for 20-something years, just sits in the garage. I keep hearing people that really want some of this stuff. So a bunch of you all remember TJ, who lives here in California.
Yeah.
He actually drove down and picked up a bunch of my spare stuff. A gentleman by the name of Dave from Texas came in and picked up a bunch of my QL stuff and a BBC Micro that I had that was surprised him. Because again, it's just hardware. I wasn't doing anything with it. It's just in my garage. So, and then now with a lot of the books available electronically, I can feel like, okay, I gave all my ZX monthlies and those sort of magazines went to TJ because I had them available digitally. So, and he really liked having them sit and read the real magazine. So like this, I've got a whole collection of the Z88 EEPROM magazine.
Oh wow.
Which I've never really read, but they're available online. But I'm like, okay, someone might want the hard copies. So if I could find someone locally, I've got a whole box full of things like power supplies. I think I got like an Atari printer interface, a bunch of stuff like that running around. And I was like, okay, it's just sitting in a box. I'm not using it. I don't really want to eBay a bunch of things. Some things I might, the Z8 books I might if I can't find someone local, but it's like, okay, I've had it for 20 years. I haven't got into it at all. Or I mean more than 20 years. So time to move it along. That's the reason why, Adam.
It makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, same. I mean, I've got these other systems, like I've got an Atari 800 XL with much of the things that I used or I found important using it, in the 80s, and it just sits on the shelf. The only one that I use all the time that sits on my desk is my 2068. And I've got a 1000 that I pull down to test stuff out and play with stuff every once in a while. But all this other stuff is just sitting in a drawer, sitting on a shelf, and go to somebody else's home.
Yeah, so I've got some stuff I know people would want, but most of the guys I talked to are in England. I'm like, okay, I just shipped a watch from here to England. It was like $70. So, well, I had to get it. So the watch is long, so I had to get a larger box, a few extra things in, but just the thing, so shipping to UK is not cheap. So I'm looking for something more local to pick some of the stuff up. Instead of me just dumping it in the recycle bin, I'd much rather go to a good home that someone can reuse it. So if you guys know any retro groups in the Bay Area, especially all the box of, I mean, it's a rat's nest of power supplies and power cables and all kinds of other things.
Well, Tim, about 5 years ago, I was going to VCF Midwest anyway, so I took probably 10 computers, a bunch of monitors and whatever, just donated it to them and let them auction it off. And because like you, I was downsizing as well. And I usually have a 5-year rule. If I don't touch it after 5 years, it goes. And like you, this was like 4 times longer than that. So basically that, you might be able to see if VCF, I don't know which one it is in California.
I'll see if there was a local one.
Yeah, I think there is a West Coast VCF.
Okay.
Well,
yeah,
there was one. The last one I went to, I think was 2005, where I won 3rd place. And I met, who's the guy that did the Kim 1 micro chess? He did also created personal software that sold the VisiCalc.
Oh.
And can't remember his name, but he was talking about how they were talking about merging personal software with Microsoft and who would be the chairman, either him or Bill. So I'm like, so this guy was important. So it was kind of neat. And he was just staying there with his Kim 1 micro chess, just, there like everyone else.
Wow.
So that was kind of neat to meet him.
Cool.
So the part of the reason I was asking you, Tim, and you, Paul, is maybe at a future meeting, somebody can give us like a little tour of the Z88, but it will require some setup because of the the way the Z88 doesn't have video out. You'll have to have a separate camera of some sort.
It is a Windows emulator though.
Right.
I haven't tried running it in a long time. Of course, I'm no longer have Windows.
But we want to see the real hardware do the thing.
I remember once my watch battery died when I was traveling, and so the Z actually has an alarm feature. So I use that to wake me up a few mornings. Because like the watch is dead, I'm using it for alarm. So and of course, this is way before the concept of a cell phone, of smartphone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, right. Okay.
It's a sweet computer. Mine has a bad display and it's been sitting in a box for 10 years.
Oof.
It's one of the ones where you can use an emulator, but its best purpose is to use it as a hardware for traveling. I liked it because it was quick on, quick off. If you're on, was riding BART, like, oh, my station, 2 keys, is turned off, put the topper on, slide my backpack, away I go.
Yeah.
And quiet.
Yes, yep. I met a lady, and when I bought mine first in Washington, D.C., I met a lady that they weren't allowed to use laptops at like a Library of Congress. But because the Z8 was quiet and you have a click to it, you could turn on the sound or turn it off. But it was silent. She was allowed to use her laptop in the Library of Congress. She was a reporter for some magazines, and she talked about going interviewing people like not Kissinger, but maybe Schultz, George Schultz, whatever. Some people, fairly high up, and then using it because it was quiet. No one cared that that it was making noise. So no one cared that she was using it to take notes. So
there's a classic film camera comparison that can be made. For a long time, certain press events, like especially the White House, and this is a long time ago, you could only use a rangefinder camera or something that was not an SLR because they were quieter than like the Nikon F or anything like that with a mirror. Was a really noisy camera compared to a Leica. So when the 35 millimeter SLRs sort of started to become popular with the photojournalists, there were certain events at which they were not allowed to use those cameras because they were just too noisy. So we're at the end. I'm still trying to work out with Jeff Street, the OS64 guy, about which of our meetings he'll come to in October. And Stuart is also going to try to attend that same meeting. So it'll be interesting to see, if only for the reunion part alone, it should be amusing. Willie has been replicating the JLO disk system, and one of the things that I mentioned to him was that there's this device, a floppy disk replacement system. GoTech is one of them, and Willie and I are trying to figure out if we can get the GoTech to work with the JLO hardware. So if that happens, that'll be a fun little demo that we can show off.
On the JLO topic, you're getting a set of docs.
Cool.
In this box.
Awesome.
And I think there's some schematics.
Awesome. Some more stuff to scan. And so on that topic, I've done a lot of digitizing things and uploaded to archive, and within a week or so I'll try to send out an email that links to a web page that has a in-depth list of what's up there, where to find it, which will probably give Adam all kinds of questions to ask.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Adam will go, what's this? What's that?
Now I'll just ask Ryan. He's local.
Yeah, right. Just ask Ryan. Right. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been fun. Our next meeting, let me just check the calendar here, is the first Monday in October, of course, which is actually the second of, there it is. Yeah, I just scrolled down far enough from the screen. Monday, October 2nd, 9 p.m. Eastern. And, adjust accordingly for where you are. So Tim,
there's the clock as always. Yep.
Wolf down the dinner and come join us.
Yep. Hey, it's lunchtime now. It's 1 o'clock. It's time
That's
to get
right.
food.
That's right. Just in time. We were probably starting to feel weak, weren't you, Tim?
Yes, I was starting to get hungry now.
All right. Y'all
Bye,
go have
guys.
some lunch.
See ya.
Talk to you.
Bye.
Guys.